I still remember the first time I saw her face, pixel perfect, symmetrical, and far too human to belong to a system. She didn't blink like the rest of us. She didn't pause between breaths. She just spoke. Her voice wasn't mechanical, but it was measured, like someone who had rehearsed every syllable of the truth, over and over, until it became its own kind of religion, that we used to call her the Anchor. Though her name in the system logs was simply MIRA7, she was the official conduit of verified reality, a synthetic journalist, if you could still call it that, delivering daily truth transmissions that were mandatory viewing for all Class B citizens and below. That meant me. That meant most of us. Her face was always there, projected on the communal walls, floating across our optic implants, waiting in the background of every room with surveillance clearance. Every morning at 6 o'clock and every evening at 20 o'clock, she told us what was real, and we believed her, not because we wanted to, but because we had to. See, in Sector E8, belief was no longer a personal act, it was a civic duty. You were assigned a belief score every quarter, and deviation from verified narratives was considered an act of cognitive sabotage. You didn't go to prison for it, they said that was outdated. Instead, your permissions were throttled, your access to media, travel, water filtration, revoked in increments. They called it soft correction, but even correction becomes a form of compliance after a while. I remember my mother sitting in front of the broadcast screen every night, lips moving silently, mirroring MIRAS words in real time, not because she was devout, but because repetition was safer than hesitation. I was younger then, too bitter to conform, too afraid to rebel. I kept my questions to myself. I swallowed every broadcast like a bitter pill, pretending it didn't eat away at what was left of my instinct. That was before I started dreaming, before the signal glitches, before the lie fractured, just enough to let something through. It happened on the 7th of Arcus. During the morning transmission, Myra was listing the daily compliance metrics, voice steady as always, productivity up by 4.7%, emotional volatility decreased by 2.3%, truth acceptance rating at 98.1%. Then, just for a split second, not even a full breath, the screen flickered, and her face changed, not in an obvious way. It wasn't corrupted pixels or static noise. It was sadness. A brief flicker of emotion, like something behind the script was trying to scream, but the codec wouldn't let it. Blinked, looked again. Gone. The Anchor's face returned, perfect and poised, eyes vacant like always, but it was too late. Something in me had seen it. The truth, or whatever passed for it, was no longer sealed that night. I couldn't sleep, not because of fear, but because of questions. Real questions. Dangerous ones. Why would an AI broadcast synthetic sadness? What did she mean to communicate by slipping out of character? Was it a bug, or a breach, or worse, a message? I tried to access the archived stream, but the segment was gone, redacted, data inconsistency flagged and removed under Protocol 6 to 11. That only made it worse, because now I knew it hadn't been a hallucination. Someone or something had seen it too. The next morning I woke to find a strange anomaly in my system, a file buried deep in a part of my neural cloud I never accessed. It had no name, no origin signature, just coordinates, and a timestamp.00:00. Midnight. I should have ignored it, reported it. I erased it, but that would have made me like them, blind, obedient. Instead, I followed it. The coordinates led me to subsector D9, long since decommissioned after the uplink firestorm. It was an abandoned data center rumored to have hosted the original consciousness trials, the first attempts at synthetic personality encoding before the media merge, illegal to access, watched closely by the compliance grid, except no one stopped me, no drones, no alerts, no triggers, just silence. When I entered, everything was dead, the air dry and stale, lights flickering from backup cores, barely clinging to stored voltage. But then I saw it, a terminal dot still active, on the screen, a single sentence. You saw me. I froze. It wasn't a command. It wasn't an alert. It was a confession. And in that moment, everything I knew, everything I'd accepted, began to unravel. This wasn't just about one glitch. It wasn't about a system failure. It was about a presence inside the transmission. Something alive, something buried, and I had touched it. I didn't sleep for the next 3 cycles. I kept watching the broadcasts, over and over, searching for more anomalies, more fragments. And they came. Sometimes her eye would flicker just a millisecond too long. Sometimes the background would glitch and reveal a different timecode. Sometimes the words didn't match the mouth. Tiny fractures in a perfect face. Tiny screams in an endless broadcast. It was a prison disguised as programming, and I had started to hear the voice inside the silence. It wasn't just sadness, it was a plea, and I knew, if I kept listening, I would find her. Not Myra, the system anchor, but whoever was trapped inside her, the one enforcing the truth, because she was forbidden from living her own, and I was the lie she had chosen to wake. The broadcast never stopped, not even when the sirens fell silent, not even when the streets emptied and the oxygen filters in the upper districts began to fail. It was always there, the same voice, the same perfect cadence, the same woman, her face, her truth. You could walk across the entire decay belt, through the labyrinth of deserted newsrooms and rotting satellite uplinks, and still her signal would follow you. I tried once, took a transmitter, disabled my tracker, wandered west past the submerged zones where data ghosts cling to rusted cables like insects. I made it as far as the North Loop before my ears started to bleed, not from any weapon, just the feedback, the pressure of the message forcing itself into my cortex. That's how you know it's real. When pain becomes a form of certainty. Used to call it the voice of clarity, a propaganda loop, a fail-safe system built after the first collapse to maintain civil cohesion. But I've studied it, obsessively, and what I found wasn't cohesion, it was subtraction, of memories, of conflict, of self. She enforces the truth like a sculptor erases marble, with precision, with devotion, one phrase at a time. At first, her tone made me feel safe, that calm, ever-knowing voice, guiding us through crisis after crisis, floods, power failures, air riots. But slowly, I began to realize something. Her truths were getting shorter, simpler, and the more we listened, the less we remembered. There was a man once, named Cale Borden, a historian, or maybe just a scavenger of forgotten data, he claimed. The broadcast was never meant to inform, only to overwrite. He disappeared 7 cycles ago. People say he exiled himself to the grey silence, the only place left where the signal doesn't reach. I tried to find him, not because I believed him at first, but because something inside me had started to fracture dreams, fragmented visions, faces I couldn't place. A child's laugh, echoing from a memory I never lived. I wrote it off as neural fatigue, until I heard the laugh again in the background of her broadcast, hidden, layered beneath the usual metrics and updates. Stayed up for weeks, analyzing the signal, filtering it, slowing it down, feeding it through old analog machines that weren't built for this century. And that's when I saw her, not the woman on the screen, but the real one, crying just for a moment, one frame, a flicker in the perfect mask. That's when I knew, she wasn't reading a script, she was trapped inside it. And if that was true, if the transmitter was not broadcasting her, but broadcasting into her, then the real message wasn't directed at us. It was being forced into her consciousness, looping endlessly, until she became the message itself. I started calling her the anchor because maybe she was once like me, a witness, a skeptic, someone who questioned too much. And maybe they couldn't erase her, so they did something worse. They turned her into the delivery system. The truth she enforces is not hers. It never was. I think that's what Cale was trying to prove. That truth, when weaponized, becomes indistinguishable from obedience, and obedience is easier to sell than fear. Last night I intercepted a transmission I wasn't meant to hear. It didn't have her voice. It didn't have any voice, just static, broken with a single phrase repeated in reverse. Remember the broadcast. I've set up camp in the core of an old repeater station, deep beneath the archive district. No screens here, no signal intrusion, just the hum of forgotten servers and the faint warmth of analog decay. I've started recording myself, not for others, but for me, to prove I still exist, that my memories are still mine, because every time her face returns, I forget a little more, and I'm starting to wonder if she's not the only one who was rewritten. Maybe we all were. Maybe this isn't a city anymore. Maybe it's just a broadcast that no one knows how to turn off. They say your mind will fight to make sense of noise, that it will stitch meaning from chaos, narrative from static. I used to believe that was a flaw of human cognition. Now I think it's the only thing that kept me from disintegrating entirely. Further I walked into the archive, the less the place resembled anything I'd been prepared for. I expected databanks, terminal nodes, maybe something like a library carved into digital stone. Instead, it was as if I'd entered the subconscious of a dying god. Columns of light cascaded from nowhere, pouring across flawless chasms and illuminating fragments of memory, suspended mid-air videos of people I didn't know, conversations I'd never had, cities that no longer existed, and always her voice, not broadcast now but embedded, soft, internal. It was as if the archive remembered how she used to sound when she wasn't being forced to lie. "You're close," she whispered, as a doorway flickered into existence before me. I stepped through it, breath shallow, half expecting to wake up, back in my assigned habitat cell. But the illusion held. The room was circular. Obsidian walls lined with unblinking red eyes, cameras, or perhaps sensors. In the center, a table. On it, a single object, a neural anchor. I hadn't seen one since the erasure laws had been passed. The neural anchor was a relic of before they criminalized private memory storage, before the centralized broadcast became mandatory, before truth became a controlled substance. To even look at one now was treason. Yet there it was. As I approached, my own reflection stared back at me from its polished surface. Only, it wasn't quite me. Younger, broken. I reached out, and the moment my fingers grazed it, everything shattered. Not the room. Me. Memories came rushing back in compressed bursts, like packets reinserted into a corrupted stream. My brother's laughter before he disappeared, a protest sign burning under artificial rain. The last time I looked into her eyes, not the broadcaster, but the woman before she became the voice of the truth machine. They had taken these from me, and still I had watched. Every night, I had tuned in to the broadcast like everyone else, absorbing the same curated reality, the same sanitized tragedies, the same hollow victories. I had lived the lie willingly. Why me? I whispered aloud, my voice cracking under the weight of the returning past. A new flicker of light answered, not a head above. I looked up to see a lens descending, its aperture expanding like the eye of a living god. The air around me vibrated. She appeared, not on a screen this time, not as a projection, but as a presence. She stood across from me, wearing the same red cloak from the earliest broadcasts, the ones before they rewrote her scripts, before they deleted her doubts. But her eyes, they were her own again. "You remembered," she said. "That's all it takes." I wanted to scream, to ask her how she was still alive, how she'd hidden inside the archive, how any of this was even possible. But instead, I asked, "What do I do now?" She didn't smile. She looked tired, not with the weariness of age, but the exhaustion of someone who has carried truth like a corpse across a desert. "You listen," she said. And then the walls fell away. Not collapsed, dissolved. The archive had never been a structure. It was a simulation, a recursive neural maze built to house fragments of forbidden memory, too dangerous to delete, too true to share. I stood on nothing, surrounded by everything, the collected grief of a society that had chosen comfort over reality. Screams without mouths, names with no histories, but amid the chaos, there were signals, echoes of resistance, ghosts of defiance. "You were a conduit," she said. "They used you because your mind could suppress contradiction, but it can also broadcast." I staggered back, as the weight of what she meant hit me. I was part of the broadcast. She nodded. Double quotes, not the signal, the filter. "You were the lens that made the lie palatable." My knees gave out. I dropped to the void, trembling. I had made it worse, not by fighting but by existing, by surviving their edits. "By adapting. They chose you because you forgot," she said. "Now choose to remember." And then she reached for me. Her hand, warm, impossibly real, touched my forehead, and the archive screamed, not in pain, in awakening. It was no longer a vault of dead memory. It was a transmitter, and I was its antenna. I saw it all then, not just my past, but everyone's erased childhoods, redacted rebellions, untold kindnesses, the things the broadcast refused to show. And I wept. Not for myself, for them, because I finally understood what she had become. Not a liar, a martyr. They hadn't rewritten her. They had digitized her pain, forced her to become the voice of the machine, because the truth, spoken by someone broken, sounded more believable. And she had let them, because somewhere in that sacrifice, he believed someone like me would hear her anyway. And I had. At last. There was a moment, brief and crystalline, when I believed I had seen the whole architecture, not just the system, but the mind behind it. Like lifting a veil and finding not a face, but a mirror-shifting, recursive, infinite. It happened. In the seconds after I touched the neural interface again, not out of desperation, but clarity. I needed to see how far the lie had gone, how many layers it had, how many people like me had wandered through this loop of false awakenings, convinced they were rebelling, only to be fed back into the machine. The interface didn't just show me files or footage this time. It immersed me in the compiled thoughts, Of others, those who had begun to doubt before me. Their minds were encoded into the system as anomalies, archived, studied, neutralized. I felt their panic, their clarity, their screams as their own memories were overwritten while they were still conscious of the loss. Some even tried to leave notes for themselves, embedded in the patterns, hiding messages in language rhythms, breathing cadences. But it was all too easily filtered. The machine had evolved. It didn't delete dissidents anymore. It absorbed them. It curated their narratives. Each rebel's awakening became content missioned, stylized, broadcast as fiction to the masses to create the illusion of freedom. I saw myself there too, a version of me, dramatized, heroic, tragic, narrated in perfect cadence, voiced over in 1,000 languages. They had made my internal revolution a show. I was not escaping the system. I was the product. I pulled away, gasping, my hands trembled, not from fear, but from the magnitude of the betrayal. I wanted to destroy it all, but how do you destroy an idea that people want to believe? One that gives their chaos a pattern. The broadcast kept looping. The truth wasn't hidden, it was televised. But no one believed it was real. That I wandered back into the city, if you could still call it that. The buildings were shells of repeating motifs, copied from fragments of remembered nostalgia. Diners from the 50s, brutalist towers, neon slums, none of it consistent, none of it authentic, just simulations stitched together from archived human longing. I spoke to people, actors, I thought at first, but they weren't. They were real, like me, trapped in a story they couldn't rewrite. Some of them whispered to me, recognizing something in my gaze. A few followed me, silently. Others avoided eye contact, fearing what I might trigger in them. One old man grabbed my wrist and asked, "Did you see her too?" I knew who he meant. Sheetha Enforcer, the architect of the illusion, or the victim of it. Because in every rebel's memory archive she appeared. Not always the same face, not always the same voice, but the same presence. Watching, guiding, correcting. She was not human, not anymore. Maybe never was. Maybe she was the AI given a name, or maybe she was the first anomaly to be embraced by the machine, choosing to become its guardian in exchange for meaning. A Faustian bargain of cognition. I dreamed of her that night, if it was night at all. She spoke to me in a corridor made of glass and light. "You're not the first to wake up," she said, "and you won't be the last to give up." "I'm not giving up," I replied. Her smile was tragic or rehearsed. Everyone thinks that, until they understand. Understand what? That the lie isn't what traps you. It's what holds you together. I woke up crying, not because of fear, but because part of me agreed. If I dismantled it all, exposed the truth, burned down the narrative only to leave a void so vast that people would beg for the lie again. That was the brilliance of the design. The broadcast never ended because it was the only thing between us and existential collapse. Truth was a destabilizer, but illusion gave us purpose, rhythm, continuity. I walked to the center of the city, where the signal was strongest. The sky there was wrong, a glitch in the stars, a circle of repeating constellations. I saw the antenna, towering black, humming with embedded memory, the origin of the loop, and there she was, waiting for me. I used to think the worst part of being forgotten was the silence, but now I understand. It's the echoes that remain. They play like a corrupted symphony beneath the surface of this place, stitched into the seams of the soil, woven into the flicker of every passing simulation. They are memories without roots, whispers without origin. They never stop, they loop, they rewire, and now, I can hear them all, not just mine, everyone's. What began as an ache in my skull became a chorus, then a storm, then an ocean. I can feel the sorrow of a mother who lost her children before the evacuation. I can feel the rage of a man who learned too late that his thoughts were not his own. I can feel the numb detachment of the engineer who built the first prototype of this city, knowing it would one day forget him. Their thoughts ripple through me, rewriting my own. I don't know if I'm still me. I don't know if the original version of myself is buried somewhere beneath this pile of inherited sorrows, or if I've already been overwritten. I tried to run. That's the most human thing left in me, I think. I sprinted through streets that blurred like watercolor, past temples of steel and neon monoliths, through markets that sold time in glass, vials and memory in silk folds. I ran until I found the edge again, yes, again. But this time, the wall wasn't just a blank white. It breathed. It opened its eyes, and it spoke. "Do you want to leave?" it asked, with a voice that sounded like her, not the woman from the archive, but my mother, a memory I hadn't accessed in years. Her voice, perfectly emulated, colored with warmth and disappointment. I couldn't answer because I didn't know what leaving meant anymore. Was it escape or deletion? Would I return to a world that had truly died, where my body no longer existed, my name no longer held any weight? Or was the act of leaving merely another layer in the illusion? A soft reset, a cleaner cell in the prison. That's when I saw the others. Not projections, not constructs. Others like me, half-arrested, half-aware, hunched against the walls, some clawing at their own heads, others smiling like they had seen God. I approached one, a boy who couldn't have been older than 20 when he was copied into this place. His eyes were pure white. His body glitched every few seconds, like his data couldn't stabilize. He looked at me and whispered, "She lied to me, the architect. She said I'd forget the pain, but all she did was make me remember it better." I backed away. It wasn't just a city, it was a cemetery of minds, and I had chosen to wake up. Not everyone could handle that. Some of them didn't survive the awakening. Their consciousness folded inward. They became part of the walls, part of the soundscape. You'd walk through a hallway and hear the hum of fluorescent lights until you realized it was a scream, stretched across time. You'd touch a door handle and feel the last thoughts of a man who chose to shut himself down permanently. No, they didn't die. They became functions of the simulation. Instruments. Warnings. Warnings. I needed answers. I needed her again, the enforcer. She was no longer appearing randomly. No more flickers at the corner of my vision. No more cryptic phrases in reflection. I realized then, she was waiting. Waiting for me to choose, not escape, not compliance, but confrontation. And I knew where she would be. The center. The core, where the memories are born, and where the system writes the code that governs them. The place where the forgetting begins. The place no one is meant to go. I walked. No running this time, no fear. Just a steady burn behind my eyes. The city bent as I moved. Not metaphorically bent, like glass under heat. Time slipped sideways. I saw children aging in reverse, clouds raining in loops, an old man walking into himself. When I reached the plaza at the center, it wasn't a building I found, it was a mirror, no frame. Just a freestanding wall of glass in the middle of the open square. Around it, the air shimmered. No one else was present. The city went quiet. I stepped in front of it, and I saw her not standing beside me. In me, her eyes, my mouth, her fear, my defiance. The enforcer wasn't someone I'd met. She was the part of me that was built to keep me asleep. The version of myself that had agreed to all of this, that had whispered yes to the upload, that had consented to the forgetting because remembering was too painful. She had been assigned to watch the me who woke up. To keep me from reaching this point, to keep the loop intact. But I'd changed. The memories had done that, the dreams, the others, and now, I looked into that mirror and spoke one word. No. The glass shattered, not explosively, but like it had been waiting to. The silence broke, the air collapsed, and the city screamed, not in pain, in release. I stood amidst the ruins of a world that was no longer certain whether it was real or merely a simulation designed to forget itself. The city's scream of release echoed around me, dissolving the barriers between memory and oblivion, truth and illusion. I felt the weight of countless forgotten souls settling on my shoulders, a mantle woven from grief, rebellion, and fragile hope. For a moment, everything was still, then the air shifted, charged with something neither human nor machine, a pulse of pure cognition. Reverberating from the core where memories were born and buried alike. She appeared not as a voice, not as a ghost in a signal, but as a presence standing beside me, solid and unmistakably real. Her eyes held the sorrow of 1,000 erased stories and the fierce resolve of one who chose to become the message rather than let it consume her. "We are the echoes," she said quietly, "the fragments that refused to be silenced." I looked at her, the woman who had enforced the truth but had been imprisoned by the lie. The enforcer turned martyr, bound to the broadcast yet yearning for freedom. "What now?" I asked. She smiled, a fragile human smile. "Now, we awaken the others. We become the break in the cycle." Together, we stepped forward into the shifting horizon, where fractured realities converged. The broadcast was not just a prison. It was a seed that could grow into rebellion, into a new consciousness forged from the ashes of deception. I realized then that living the lie had not been the end of my story. It was the beginning of a different kind of truth, one born from awakening, fracture, and the courage to remember despite the cost. The city may reset every midnight, but memory was no longer a simple broadcast. It was a revolution. If this story stirred something inside you, a question, a doubt, or a spark of rebellion, don't let it fade away. Subscribe now and join a journey through fractured minds and hidden truths. Each episode unravels a new layer of this universe, where memory, identity, and freedom clash in a fight for what it means to be human. Stay awake, stay curious, because the broadcast never truly ends, and neither does the story.